What is up, guys? Gamer68063 Yes here, back in my reaction video. And today, we're reacting to something that is not basketball related. We're reacting to how the Panthers' 15-win season and potential dynasty went up in smoke. So let's get into it.
The 2015 Carolina Panthers stormed into the Super Bowl looking to claim the franchise's first championship. This team's journey began in 2011 when Ron Rivera took over as head coach and Carolina drafted Cam Newton first overall. The centerpiece of a rebuilding team, Newton's play demanded the spotlight from day one. And as he developed, so did the pieces around him. Carolina's defense already had cornerstones in Charles Johnson, their pass rush extraordinaire, plus the do-it-all linebacker Thomas Davis. But in 2012, Carolina found their quarterback for the other side of the ball. Luke Kuechly catapulted from Defensive Rookie of the Year to perennial All-Pro.
Yeah.
And in that same draft, the Panthers also uncovered a fifth-round gem in Josh Norman. The defense led Carolina to a division title in 2013, then, despite mixed results, they ran it back a year later. All of that set up an unforgettable 2015. The offense more than caught up to Carolina's D and outscored the rest of the league. Jonathan Stewart turned in his best season since 2009, while Greg Olsen led the way receiving for the third straight year. Ryan Khalil anchored an offensive line which made life as easy as possible for their superstar QB. Despite being without his top wideout all year, Newton torched opponents through the air, on the ground, and had fun doing it. The results? A 15-win regular season, a dismantling of the defending NFC champs, a complete rout in the conference championship. Plus, Newton added league MVP to his accolades. They sat moments away from being on top of the NFL, had enough talent to be a threat for years to come, and what happened instead feels almost cruel. With hindsight, the Panthers' fate likely would have been the same whether they won or lost Super Bowl 50, but a championship always helps. And against the Broncos, it was well within their grasp. While both defenses shined all night, Carolina made it a one-possession game with 10 to play. And even though their offense hadn't found its rhythm, this was the same team that scored over 30 points per game heading into the Super Bowl. So once their D forced consecutive 3-and-outs, Cam had a chance to end things with just one drive.
This is where it was,
other plans.
That play changed the whole game.
For the second time that night, Miller forced the ball from Newton's hands, and instead, the Panthers watched Denver ice the game. By the time it was all over, Carolina had drastically outgained the Broncos, had nearly twice as many first downs, but had also struggled to protect the ball. With 3 turnovers to Newton's name, it felt like the result his detractors had been hoping for. Newton was called out for not reacting quicker to the lost ceiling fumble, and he gave them even more fodder at the post-game press conference. Cam expressed his disappointment, gave credit to Denver, and left after about 5 minutes. But those that mattered had Newton's back. Rivera viewed this as motivation for his star QB to use as Carolina defended its NFC crown. The Panthers maintained high expectations for themselves, reasonably so after a 15-win season. The majority of their core was still under contract, but there was one large, loud exception. Josh Norman had well-timed his breakout campaign to coincide with a contract year. While GM Dave Gettleman wanted to keep him, Norman said he deserved to make top cornerback money, a fair but complex thought for a 28-year-old DB with one great season to his name. Thankfully, the franchise tag could both sides while working on a long-term deal.
Next season, you went to the Redskins.
Carolina could tag him, then about 7 weeks later, rescind the tag completely. That decision came down to a handful of reasons. Norman threatened to skip OTAs if Carolina didn't meet his lofty asking price. So instead of doing an extended dance, the Panthers cut bait. Norman was free to get some other sucker to make him the highest paid corner in the league, which he found in Washington. While a Norman-less secondary looked like a liability, most of Carolina's other starters were coming back. That included their former first-round wide receiver, who could help make an already dangerous offense even more so. It stoked optimism. Players felt like improvements were made to their already impressive squad. And outside the organization, some lofty ideas were thrown around for this team. Expectations of football in February for Carolina seemed like a
Everybody
safer
thought
bet than
that, and
most.
it went
Their very
downhill.
first step towards that also presented a chance to avenge their Super Bowl loss.
At 1-800-CONTACTS, we're here for Allison, whose prescription just expired. Don't worry.
Bitch ass ads out here.
For the first 3 quarters, it looked like Carolina would clear that hurdle. Newton's connection with Kelvin Benjamin was on point. The defense collected 3 takeaways, which helped them own a 10-point lead to start the 4th, but the Broncos quickly swung things in their favor with a pair of touchdowns to open that final quarter, the second of which came after a Newton interception. Even though Cam managed to put Carolina in position for the win with just 9 seconds left, Graham Gano pushed the 50-yard attempt wide. And instead of exercising demons, their 4th quarter collapse made for a disappointing start to 2016. They bounced back in Week 2 against Chip Kelly's hapless 49ers, but 4 straight losses, including 3 to divisional opponents, left them in a deep hole. Injuries played a major part. A banged-up offensive line led to a harassed quarterback, and the hits on Newton piled up. He suffered a concussion against Atlanta, which forced him to miss time. And although their bye week offered
I remember
an
that concussion.
opportunity to heal up and rebound, the second part of the season was more of the same. Khalil became the second starter from the O-line to hit IR. The defense lost multiple leaders for much of the final stretch, highlighted by Kuechly, who missed Carolina's last 6 games with long-lasting concussion symptoms. Adding insult to injuries, Rivera reprimanded Newton for not following the team's dress code ahead of a game. Team chemistry came into question as people searched for an answer to how this team fell so fast. Others, though, were just happy when the free fall was over. Carolina became the first team to go from a 15-win season to a last-place finish in their division. After having Super Bowl ambitions just months earlier, Newton wanted to get away from things for a bit and hopefully find joy in the sport once again. It would probably be tough to enjoy football when you had to finish the season with a partially torn rotator cuff in your throwing shoulder. As Newton healed up, the Panthers stepped into a big moment for the franchise's future. They recognized the need to better protect their star and shelled out for a second Khalil brother to secure Newton's blindside. Then, with the 8th overall pick in the draft, they gave Newton the most talented sidekick he'd get in Carolina. Free agency also boosted Carolina's defense after they'd taken a step back, but this team still closely resembled the one that played in the Super Bowl. It just became clear how much had to go right to get there. And behind the scenes, things definitely weren't going right. The seemingly abrupt firing of their general manager raised some eyebrows. Gettleman had made some tough personnel decisions in the past, and showed a hesitance to extend some of the team's leaders, which made this decision easier for Carolina's owner, Jerry Richardson. Once Gettleman was out, those players who had helped the Panthers reach new heights were rewarded. When the actual games began, the 2017 season proved just as interesting as the offseason. There were clear high notes, like what Christian McCaffrey brought to the offense, which helped Carolina bounce back and return to the playoffs as a wild card. But like 2016, the Panthers rarely played at full strength. Olsen's foot struggled to support the weight of his extension. Kuechly, for the 3rd straight year, suffered a concussion. And a pair of Panther stalwarts missed time down the stretch with suspensions. While Newton managed to start every game, he also managed to again make headlines off the field. But an even bigger bombshell came that December. Sports Illustrated uncovered that multiple large-sum settlements had been paid by Carolina's owner for workplace misconduct committed by Richardson. As the disgraced owner prepared to sell the team, the players prepared for a playoff game against a division rival that had swept them in the regular season. A missed 25-yard field goal in the first quarter ultimately made Carolina's comeback harder. Despite a 14-point fourth quarter, the offense still needed to find the end zone once again. But instead, the Saints defense put Newton in the dirt, ending Carolina's season. 2017 could have offered hope, but for this specific team, it became a new peak to fall from. Carolina's ability to keep the roster intact couldn't last. After 11 seasons together, the Panthers parted ways with Johnson that February. Then, 2 days later, released the franchise's all-time leading rusher. McCaffrey's arrival had made the move inevitable, but this changing of the guard mirrored the franchise's larger shift. David Tepper, the former Steelers minority owner, bought the organization that spring, and although only time could tell what adjustments might follow, he made it very clear where his focus lay. Well, Dave, I've got some good and bad news for you. The good, Carolina sprinted out to a 6-2 start. McCaffrey picked
I
up
remember
right
this.
where he left off and
Then it
looked
just
like a
went
superstar in the
straight
making.
downhill.
Injuries, though, continued to be the story. They lost both starting tackles for the season by the end of week 1. Olsen refractured the foot that gave him problems in 2017 and forced him to miss time early, then ruptured his plantar fascia, which landed him on IR for the season's final month. By then, Carolina's winning ways were long gone. That slide began against Pittsburgh in a blowout where
That
he
hit
took
was
a
horrible.
direct shot to his throwing shoulder, which he never fully recovered from. As everything unraveled, it looked like Rivera might not last long under Tepper's leadership. Carolina put Cam on ice for the final 2 weeks and limped into an offseason of
Oh, shut the fuck up. I don't care.
Today, what would you do?
What would I do?
Off your mortgage,
Don't care.
uncertainty. But they didn't have to wait long for change. The day after their season ended, Ryan Khalil, their center of 12 years, called it a career. 9 days later, the only guy who had been there longer than Khalil announced he wouldn't be returning to the Panthers either. And although he wasn't around for the Super Bowl, Julius Pepper's retirement left Carolina without yet another leader, both in the locker room and in opposing backfields. They still had Kuechly, who played all 16 games for the first time since 2014, but even in his prime, he could only do so much. Rivera would keep doing whatever he could to keep afloat a defense that had more questions than answers. But the head coach recognized after the previous season's letdown, nothing was certain. Even the health of their quarterback remained questionable, as he needed surgery for the second time in 2 years. The surgery came shortly after Tepper voiced his concern for Newton's throwing shoulder, and made it clear that he didn't see the QB as a guarantee. Cam's repaired shoulder remained a storyline for 2019, but once he got healthy enough to make a preseason appearance, a new injury to his foot cut Newton's night short. He dodged a fracture, but the abbreviated performance and further time missed made it tougher to evaluate his original injury. Once week 1 rolled around, Cam played through it all, but it became clear he still wasn't at 100%. He did his best to joke about the situation as the game plan revolved much more around McCaffrey than himself, but with a quick turnaround for a Thursday night game, even if Newton didn't want to respond to the questions, his play provided the answer. Once again, Cam didn't look right. They fell to the Bucs at home, and afterwards, Newton took his share of the blame while doing what no one else from the Panthers would. He acknowledged his injuries. Cam re-aggravated his foot, but beyond that, once again, there were few answers. He was day to day, then week to week, then all of a sudden, Newton announced on his YouTube channel that it turned out to be a Lisfranc injury. He said there wasn't a reasonable timeline for it. Could be 1 week, could be 6 weeks. In the end, it was the whole season. Carolina waited until after week 9 to put him on IR. And although McCaffrey and Cam's replacement Kyle Allen had actually led the Panthers to a 5-3 record, for the second season in a row, the back half of the schedule saw them go into a tailspin. They dropped their final 8 games, and this time around, Rivera wasn't safe. With 4 weeks remaining, Tepper fired his head coach, which turned out to be the first of many moves that would make this team nearly unrecognizable from their Super Bowl appearance. The next and most surprising piece to fall was Luke Kuechly. At just 28 years old, the former Defensive Player of the Year and 7-time All-Pro called it a career. He made the difficult decisions sound pretty simple. Kuechly felt like it was time, and this allowed him to go out on his own terms. 2 weeks later, Greg Olsen's days as a Panther were over after 9 seasons. The 34-year-old tight end would have liked to have stayed with the organization, but it wasn't meant to be. And whatever that future direction ended up being, one thing had been pretty clear for a while. Cam Newton also didn't seem to fit. Since he hit IR, speculation swirled as to what Carolina would do with the former first overall pick. At 30 years old, Newton's health appeared to be the biggest concern for the Panthers. Then again, his condition often worsened because he continuously played through injuries and the team wouldn't step in until it was arguably too late. If Carolina wanted to move him, it seemed like they could get something in return for Cam. But the process became so dragged out, so endlessly talked about, that eventually it all got messier than needed. And once they blew their chance, Carolina threw their hands up and cut ties, releasing the former NFL MVP and fully committing to a new era. Newton had taken the league by storm from the first game of his career. There are no comparisons for what he was capable of doing when fully healthy. That just became too rare of a thing. This team had gone wherever Cam went. The downs began to outnumber the ups, and eventually it distracted from that amazing 2015 season. But this team was great. They were fun, and they completely blew their chance to be one of the best ever. Hey, thanks for making it this far.
That's good enough video here. Obviously now Cam Newton's on the Patriots, gonna lead us to an amazing season. But that's the end of the video here. We'll just see you guys next time. Peace.